Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of Photographer's Favorites. Thanks so much for joining me. This is the show where I pick out 5 of my favorite photos from other photographers, and my guest picks out 5 of their favorite photos, and we talk about everything we love about them. Today, I'm really excited to have Josh Hauge with me. How's it going?
Good, good. It's going well.
Yeah, man. Thanks for taking the time to join me and picking out some great images. I got to do a quick sneak peek at some of them, so you got some good ones in there, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, yeah, it should be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. How's photography been to you lately?
Been good. So I just took a family trip up to Massachusetts, so I got to do some shooting when I was up there.
Nice.
Yeah, it was
Nice.
awesome.
Any particular species you were working with? I'm guessing more shorebird stuff, which is probably what I'm seeing some of right here, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I did some stuff with a spotted sandpiper. It was mostly on a lake, and
Oh,
then
nice.
yeah, and then eastern kingbird nest that I found, which was
Okay,
pretty
cool.
cool.
Nice,
Yeah,
man. That's very cool. Um, dude, that sun. Come on. That's killer.
yeah. That was in Cape May. It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that was your Cape May trip.
Yeah, that was in Cape May.
Nice.
So
How was that overall?
it was really good. So I was there for 2 days, so not a ton of time, but I got
Yeah.
a lot of shooting in, so it was really fun.
Excellent, man. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, will it tend to be a little bit of a boring bird, but you put him in some color and some sun like that, and it's a magical photo. So well done, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Nicely done. All right, cool. You ready to get into the show?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. We're going to start with the photo you chose from Tobias here. I mean, you picked this photo. It hits all my favorite points, right? Really good backlight, really interesting species, and some fun bokeh in it. And then is it like raining at the same time?
Yeah, I know. I saw
Yeah, a
those.
light rain with the sun. Like, come on, that's so great. Beautiful plover species. I'm guessing. I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, I mean, just gorgeous bird. So, love the color palette overall. The lighting is great. Having that little bit of rain come in there just adds an extra element to of interest to it to me. I love how these rocks kind of slope down on both sides, and then
Yeah.
in the bokeh you can see there's like some interesting shadowing of some foreground stuff he's shooting through, and a little bit of play of lens flare here too, which I'm certainly a fan of. That is something that I know a lot of photographers, are not a fan of. So I think it's personal preference, but sometimes I love when that lens flare is in the right spot, and I think it is here because it's not interfering with the bird and its head and that sort of thing. So yeah, overall just a lot going on that all works together so well in
Yeah.
this image.
Yeah, I this image totally stood out to me.
Yeah,
And also in the caption, I think he said something about like obviously what you said, it was raining and stuff, but he said that's sort of luck, but at the same time, it like no one sees the hours of planning and stuff and going out there. And I thought that
yeah,
was a really good point because initially I was like, oh my gosh, who gets rain and this amazing light all at the same time? I was like,
yep,
you've got to be kidding me.
yep,
But then I read it and I was like, that's a really good point because a lot of times when you go out and you get all these cool photos, people are like, "Oh, it must have just been easy. It's just
yeah,
walk down, like click the button." But there's like a lot of planning and stuff that goes into it. So I thought it was a
totally.
really good point.
Yeah, no, that is a wonderful point. I mean, that's the majority of what we do. The majority of time spent out is not taking photos.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
really is the reality of it.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another thing, right? To get those random weather conditions like that, they don't happen that often. So you have to put the time in. You have to be out there over and over and over again, unless you do happen to be just randomly lucky, and that does happen, right? But
Yeah, for sure.
the more time out there, the more luck you're gonna have with
Yeah,
those weather conditions.
yeah, yeah. And I also just one more thing about the image. I love
Yeah.
the not vignette, but the sort of like dark shadows at the top.
Yep.
And really, I think it frames it in well, sort of draws your attention. Yeah, I just thought that was a really cool element of the photo, besides like the
Yeah.
book and everything that's going on.
Yeah, 100% agree. And you can tell it's not like a post added vignette because the bottom corners don't really have it as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
just, it's a
exactly.
natural darkening in the background. And you can even see like these lighter spots kind of just meander their way back in there.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah, it's really cool how that works out.
yeah, super great image.
Yeah. All right, here's one I picked.
Oh wow, that's super interesting at first sight. It's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so I think I'm loving the composition of how it's sort of just framed in there, and then also how the what is it? What bird is it?
Kittiwake, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so Kittiwake. Yeah, it's just sort of its beak isn't out. You can't really, or at least I
Yep.
can't see the beak. It's sort of tucked in there, sleeping or resting. And I think
Yeah.
that's super cool. I was just, and then the bokeh everywhere. It's just totally shining. And I don't even know how they would get the bokeh up there. It looks like it's on a rock, maybe like a wave or something.
Could be.
But
Yep.
yeah, it's just so cool how it frames it in so nicely, just in this little pocket. I don't know, it just gives really like peaceful vibes almost. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, especially with the color. The color is all it has like the muted blues and the grays and the whites, and that matches the Kittiwake's plumage almost perfectly,
Yes.
I think.
Yep.
So yeah, super, super cool image. Super creative too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
Victor is always like on top of it with creativity. I always love seeing what he does, and this is one of those images that at first I was just it stopped me in my tracks, and then I was like, okay, what am I looking at? It actually took me a second to kind of figure it out, and for anybody that's viewing, just to make sure, like, here's the Kittiwake, it's tucked in, there's its head, tail kind of swinging back. So to me, it like takes a minute to kind of figure that out, and I like that about the photo because then
yeah,
once you see it, then you can't unsee it. And it definitely had what you said, right? That kind of peaceful vibe to it, and I like his initial almost title here, "Dream On,"
yeah,
of it just kind of resting there, and yeah, I mean, how he got that bokeh in the foreground, I don't know if it was like a splashing waves or something like that. Would be my guess, like maybe crashing waves in the foreground, but
yeah,
um, it's it's an interesting experiment to me on when is something too much versus just right there, because I think shots like this can quickly get into that sparkling bokeh being overpowering, and I'll bet there's probably some people that would say that about it, right? It's just not their taste, but to me it works. There is a fine balance there, and it's actually not too overpowering. it's
yeah.
it's actually causing you to take a minute to find the subject, which I think, to me, I enjoy. And so I think it's a type of image that's maybe not mass appeal to everyone, but to those that it does appeal to, it really appeals to.
Yeah, and also it gives just sort of an essence of the, I guess, habitat where it is, because whenever I see these like gulls or these birds up on those rocks, they're getting like smashed by waves and stuff
Yeah,
constantly if they're in the right spot.
yeah,
So yeah, I feel like that really presents that well. And also what you were saying about being too much, I feel like sometimes I'll take images with bokeh and they'll be like super overexposed or something, the bokeh will. And I'm always like wondering whether I keep it or not or what I do. And I think this is a really great example of how it can work.
yeah. Agreed. Yep. Yeah, and it's almost like a low contrast look to it in the
Yeah.
final image, and I think that helps it, right? Instead of trying to just like punch it up and make it really vivid and make that subject jump out, this is a very different take. This is the subject kind of fades into the image there, and yeah, it
Yeah.
gives it a dreamy vibe, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Next up. Ooh, nice, man. Look at that backlight. Fuzzy chicks glowing like they're the best in backlight.
Yeah.
Absolutely love the super low perspective that gives that smeared reflection. I'm such a fan of that. I know it's not quite as clear and like mirror like as a little bit higher perspective clear reflection, but man, I love that smeared low perspective reflection you get. And little top like pops of bokeh here, but nothing. This is kind of the opposite, right? Not a lot of overpowering bokeh here, and it's just all about the subject. And that dark, rich background. It's just everything's rich, golden, red, yellow tones, orange. It's just a gorgeous image, man. Yeah.
Yeah, super. Yeah, like you were saying, the backlight with the fluff is just always like what catches your eye. But um, yeah, and also sometimes when I see images, or ones I take myself, I notice I'll like cut off a bit of the reflection or whatever, and then have to point it lower the next time I go out. And I
Yeah.
thought this was so cool because almost, I mean, it's almost halfway, but a little bit more of the frame is towards the reflection. So you get all that smear and it just gives it, I don't know, it'd be such a different image without that.
Yeah.
So I think it looks so cool. And also, I'm not sure, is that a water drop or is there just like bokeh?
Right here, it does look like it. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say so. Yep.
Yeah. I thought that was a really cool element too. I was just sort of like dripping off there. And
Definitely.
yeah. And the colors there are just so smooth. It gives this like super, it pops your eye immediately to,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what species it is.
Mute
Mute
swan,
swan?
he said.
Mute
Yep.
swan? Okay. Yeah. So I thought that was cool too, because I've never even seen the mute swan. Although I think maybe once or twice, but yeah, I've never like actually spent time photographing it. So
Oh, okay.
the beak on this one is so different from beaks I've seen, like
Yeah.
from Gosling, something I've photographed. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I love it. I bet it is totally a water drop because you can see how there's like a sparkle right on the tip of the bill from where it's still kind of wet there and the sun's hitting that as well, which is a neat touch, I think, in addition to the water drop. I
Yeah.
also really like what you mentioned about the composition on this. This is a thoughtful composition to include that long smeared out reflection.
Yeah.
A standard bird on the water like that, most people would put the bird bottom left and have more space above it. That's kind of like the standard way, at least most people would compose it, myself included. And
Yeah.
so this I think is shows a lot of thought from the photographer to compose it that way.
Yeah, I also remember the first time I sort of saw a smeared reflection when I was actually shooting. Just
Yeah.
at like a little pond near my house, there was a ringneck duck,
Mm.
and the water was super calm. And then I was
Yep.
like, oh, if I get really low, this perspective gets super smeared and it looks
Yeah.
really cool. So ever since then, when I see images with that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a good job, or it
Yep.
looks so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. I think on those super calm days, right? If you lift your perspective up maybe a foot, all of a sudden you'd probably get like that clear mirror reflection. And to me it's a different take on the photo. It's like the smeared reflection makes it more about the subject itself, whereas a mirrored reflection as a viewer, it's more about that reflection because it's such a mirror and most people are kind of like, wow, that's amazing how it's that calm because it doesn't happen that often.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. All right. Keeping it backlit.
Oh wow, that is such a cool image. Yeah, so I think initially, besides like the backlit and stuff, just the color tones here with the sand at the bottom, and then
Yeah.
it sort of moves up to this like peach orange color, um, reflected beautifully off the wings, but also the blur at the top of the wings is I
Yeah.
think is really cool because it's positioned so perfectly that like the wings are like this. You know what
Yes.
I mean?
Yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, and I know some people that I've talked to, whatever, they say they really hate when the wings get like blurry at the tips or whatever, but I think this really works here because you got like the head-on perspective of the oyster catcher, and
Yeah.
then you got the wings flipped up, so looks super cool. And I I had just gotten to photograph some oyster catchers recently, and
Nice.
I didn't realize how big they were. I don't
Uh,
know. I just thought they were like these little shorebirds
oh,
for
you
some.
hadn't seen them before?
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen
Oh,
them.
okay, cool.
Yeah, and I just thought they were, like medium sized, I don't know, not
Yeah.
plover, but a little bigger. And then I
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
them walking around. I was like, whoa, that's huge. So
Yeah.
the fact they didn't clip any of the wing is, I guess, a
Yep.
little impressive because I don't know, though, it's like totally flying up and it's that head on perspective that looks super cool in the image.
Yeah, it's funny. They are large and in charge, and they are not subtle in any way, both in their sound and their presence. They're
Yeah.
uh they're definitely in your face birds. So this to me kind of like shows off some of that personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. And 100% agree with everything you said. I love what you mentioned about the wingtip blur like that. I think that's such one of those, photographer personal preference things. I've heard the same thing from many people. They're like, oh, I want, 1/8,000th of a second because I want to
Yeah.
freeze everything in that wing. And for me, I'd much prefer to see that motion blur that gives an indication of the blur of like the motion of the wings. That's what it translates to me. Um,
Yeah.
I love the symmetry of this. Getting a bird head on shot is difficult in any way, just like a normal portrait of it standing or perched somewhere. Getting it in flight is just next level challenging. So, getting that symmetry and the wings coming in like that. I love the tail splayed out. And I do love that the feet are kind of offset, like one's a little bit higher than the other, getting ready for the landing like that. It's a nice touch, and that backlit glow through the wings is incredible. So, and I know exactly where he took this, and I've only been there once, but the one time I was there, I had very similar lighting with Oystercatchers, just beautiful backlit glow on this one particular evening. So I think it's so cool when a photo, whether it was actually taken in the same place or not, but when you see a photo from another photographer and it can just transport you to a similar experience you had with said same species or a very similar encounter,
Yeah.
as far as lighting and all that, I think that's such a nice thing that photography can do for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely true.
All right, let's see what we got next. Ooh, nice. Love the framing on this. I mean, that is a cool, well framed scene, well seen from the photographer. Yeah, it's the arch going around there. This is another, not another, but a great example of a busy scene that works, right? If we kind of look, there's a lot going on here, but man, does your eye just go straight to that right in the beginning? You know, it's the brightest spot. The common yellowthroat's just chilling right in that beautiful, I think it's probably like a grapevine, curving around there like that. And I do love the little green leaves that are coming down in on that branch that just kind of hanging right over top of it. And then the texture and colors you get in this background over here are absolutely outstanding. So it's pretty cool to have such a small and frame bird with visually a lot going on, but it's not constantly yanking your eye away from the bird. You know, you're on first initial view, boom, my eye goes right smack to that common yellowthroat.
Yeah. And also, I feel like I'm always leaning towards getting cleaner compositions. That lately I've been focusing on trying to shoot more textures and more
Yep.
environment type stuff. So when I saw this initially, your eye goes right to the bird. I was like, it's not the cleanest shot because there's the branches, but I think that sort of adds to it overall, like you
Yeah.
were saying, because it sort of shows, because whenever I've seen a common yellowthroat, they've been in just the most like dense brush and
They're the
habitat.
worst.
Yeah, I know. They are the worst. So when I saw this, I was like, that's so true to the habitat these guys live in because
Yeah.
it's not like this open, beautiful. I mean, they can be beautiful, but it's always like these super thick forest and brush.
Yep.
So, and yeah, and also the colors are really interesting in the back six. There's some reds going on and like
Yeah.
yellow and blue, just all these colors sort of thrown together that I think really work. So,
Yeah, I mean this out of focus texture right in through here and here, those colors are incredible. It's such a great
yeah.
pattern. And that's the kind of thing that I feel like you can't plan at all, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, all right, if I am working with a bird out in a wide open, marsh or something like that, and I have a really distant background or laying on a beach, it's like, okay, I know what that background's going to look like when I shoot it with a long telephoto lens and a lower aperture. It's just going to be
Yeah.
a smooth blend of that color or maybe one or two colors, right? So you kind of have a real good idea of what it's going to look like. If you shoot a scene like this, at least me, I have no idea what it's going to look like. I have
Yeah.
a vague idea that it may work, but with the way the light's hitting in the background and some of the stuff's in shade, like that's where you start to get all these crazy interesting patterns and textures and an element of surprise in your own photos. And I think that can be a really fun thing. And obviously it doesn't always work out. Sometimes it's like an element of surprise of, whoa, that's nasty. But every once in a while it comes out and you're like, wow, I can't believe it did that, and it's not anything I planned at all.
Yeah. And also, I feel like sometimes when I'm shooting, especially if it's a bad day where I haven't really gotten or seen anything, I'll look at different perches in light and be like, oh, if the bird just landed there, that would look so good. And sometimes I'll even like take pictures of the perch and then go back and be like, was it really as good as I thought, or was I just like desperate? So
Yeah.
when I saw this, it was that same thought that I couldn't have planned that really. Like I wouldn't have
Yes.
walked through and been, oh, a common yellowthroat would look so cool if it landed here.
Yep.
But it works just so well together, and it sort of all draws your eye towards the bird and that cool vine. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it really works as an image overall.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. With songbird photography in the forest, that's one of the things I bounce back and forth between. Like some of the times I'm trying to, I do, like you said, right? I see a perch and then I'll hang with the bird and wait and try and hope it gets on that perch. And I have a vision for the shot. And
Yeah.
those can come out great. Sometimes they're really great images that I love and they're a favorite. But
Mhm.
the bird does something, it goes somewhere, and then you just shoot it and it's completely unplanned, and then it turns out there's something more special about those to me
Yeah.
than the more planned and thought out shot.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like in certain habitats, I'm getting more like shots I wouldn't have really been able to plan or
Yeah.
anything, especially with songbirds and stuff, because you get far away and you get all this brush and you get close and
Yep.
it sort of blurs everything nicely. So yeah, especially with warblers and stuff, they're always bouncing around. Like
Totally.
they're here and then they jump one area and it's totally different.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and sometimes that works in your favor and sometimes that doesn't. But
Exactly. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about the perches too. Like you're walking around, you see a perch too. I do that all the time. I've said, I don't know if I said it on this show, but I know I've said it on the podcast where I'm like, I walk around, I see the world in perches. I'm like, oh, that's a nice perch. That's a nice perch, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I know many photographers that have a catalog of perches that they photograph that with no bird on it. So you're not alone there, Josh.
Yeah.
All right, here's our next one.
Oh wow, that is so. Are these porcupines?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, it's porcupines. Okay, so mother and juvenile porcupine.
Yeah,
Wow. That is, I don't. I've only seen a porcupine a handful of times,
same
and
here.
never mind photographing it in good situations. So
I
this
know.
is super interesting. Um, I mean, first of all, it sort of looks like they're giving each other like a hug, sort of.
Yeah, I bet. I'm
But
guessing it's probably like a grooming thing, maybe. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, it looks like it, like what the chimpanzees do or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and those flowers in the background, or yeah, in the background, I
Yeah.
don't know, it sort of frames it all nicely together because it's more of a tight portrait, but I think it really works with, the porcupine's quills going everywhere and you
Yep.
got them embracing each other and cleaning each other and stuff. So, yeah, the bit of the white flowers in the background, I think really help out and sort of draw your eye to them. And it's just another extra element in the photo. That's cool because at least when I've seen porcupines, they've sort of been in these like fields or super dense forests and
Hmm.
stuff. So I think this really works in making them stand out together, like two porcupines too, not just one alone.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
whenever I am shooting two subjects, it's like this whole other world that I have to,
Isn't it?
yeah, because I'm always trying to like focus on one. And if there's
Yeah.
one like tail sticking, I'm like, okay, gotta move the
It's always a
frame.
mess.
Yeah, exactly.
It's way harder.
Yeah, yeah. So this really works, I think, with the two sort of like together interacting in that behavior. It really comes together, make an awesome photo.
Yeah, what you just said is to me the key word of this photo and why it works so great, and that's behavior. And that to me is the ultimate of any wildlife photo. When you can capture really, especially if it's unique behavior of any subject, that to me always elevates a photo beyond just a portrait every single time,
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
if you can have all the additional great elements that make a good portrait in there as well, like this one, good light, good composition, a nice background, pleasing additional elements, right? If it has all those on top of the behavior, well, now it's just an amazing photo. And I want to point out what Simon mentioned in his caption here, that we all have a bias towards cute animals. And he mentions, he's like, if this were foxes, we'd have a more sentimental view. And he's like, the reality is that this moment is no different. It doesn't matter what the animal is. And it's funny that he's saying towards more cute animals, because I don't know why, but to me, like these porcupines are incredibly cute right here
Yeah, yeah,
in
same.
this pose. Like I'd say like they're almost more cute than the fox, because there's like an element of, I don't know, I guess you think of a porcupine as just like this, this ball of spines that's out to get you kind of thing, right? They almost
Yeah.
have that aura about them, that reputation about them, I should say. But when you see them in person, they're just kind of dumpy and slow moving, and they're, I don't know, I find them incredibly cute.
Yeah.
So I think seeing this almost tender interactive moment between them sheds them in a different light, and so it hopefully makes people that maybe have never seen a porcupine in person maybe think about them differently. And I think an image like this can be really powerful that way, because I think especially people that aren't really into wildlife,
Mhm.
they have so many misconceptions about what certain animals are and how they actually behave and stuff like that, especially when you get into like snakes and reptiles, and so many people are like, oh my god, they're gonna, especially like venomous snakes are like, oh, they're gonna kill you, and it's like, no, it's
Yeah,
not.
like they're not out to get you.
Yeah, everything is not out to get you. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I love that this has that added extra kind of element or layer to the photo, just that goes just beyond the photo itself, which I find to be a beautiful shot anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about the bias towards like that you were talking about because sometimes I'll take a photo, almost the same photo in like really cool lighting situations of like a crow versus some cool warbler. And if
Yep.
I show like my parents or my sister or something, they'll be like, like the
Yeah.
warbler one is way better because it's
Yeah.
not a crow. And sometimes I have good images of like bird species that are just super common, like robins and stuff
Hmm.
people see all the time. And it almost makes me want to share those more because I'm like, that it doesn't matter as much. You know, it's still cool to
Yep.
see. And of course I get excited when I see new species and stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, just showing the importance of like the less species people want to focus on, or the not as
Yes.
cute animals, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
is really important. And yeah, well captured super well here.
It
And I
really
think
is.
the caption is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I like that he put that caption in there. It definitely caused me to think about that whole concept a little bit more. So,
Yeah, for sure.
beautiful one from Josh. Yeah, I love this. I love that he says Miami Vice lighting. Yeah, it does have that bit of rock star spotlight. You've got some, same as the earlier shot, right? Interesting colors and textures that are happening through a background that, may or may not have been planned. I don't know the situation on this shot, but, this is shooting warblers in the sun. I'm gonna just let me bounce into a quick story of my experience with this kind of photography and the struggle that it is. To me, this is the challenge of warbler photography in the sun. Is it can yield incredible results like this, but the window of opportunity is so short. Compared to an overcast day. An overcast day, you can be out and shoot for hours and hours, and you can shoot every direction. You don't have to worry about shadows and harsh backgrounds and hot spots and all this stuff.
Mhm.
But it doesn't do what the sun can do, and this is a perfect example of it. This beautiful rimlit spotlight of this ovenbird singing, and then these crazy amazing colors and textures in the background that, let's face it, if this was flat overcast lighting, this photo would be vastly different. It would probably still be good, but it would be vastly different in its look. And so I appreciate any time I see a photographer achieve something good using the sun with warblers and songbirds in the forest, because I know how incredibly challenging it is and how short that window of opportunity is to make it work. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I also, last thing I want to mention is I really dig the both the pose. I love the leg up and down pose on the warbler, as well as the composition. Going with a vertical composition, not something we see a ton of with songbird photography, and it helps to include more of this really fun background. So it was a really wise choice in Josh's case
Yeah.
to make.
Yeah, and part of the reason this stood out, I mean, besides the fact it's such an amazing image, is I was actually photographing. There's a lot of like there's this lake near my house, and there's a ton of ovenbirds for some reason in this one spot. So when walking through, you just hear them all the time, but they're always super high up in the trees, and like the ones there will never come down for some reason.
No
So
kidding.
yeah,
That's funny.
yeah. So, I mean, I've seen them come down a couple times, but at least when I've been there, they've always just sort of stayed at the top and sung and stuff.
Yeah.
So, and especially what you were saying about the backlight, I feel I had been seeing lots of really great warbler images, but not as many with like backlight or sun or these
Yep.
super cool like colors. And not that the ones on overcast days weren't good, because they're super
Correct.
interesting. Yeah, because it shows the bird and the habitat and everything. But this stood out because to get like an ovenbird on such a cool perch with such great light is, I don't know, adds such a different element to the photo, I think, and something I definitely want to dive deeper into with warbler photography in general.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it goes back to the same thing we were talking about in that first photo, and it's time in the field, right? You got to spend so much time out there to be out when you get sun, when you get clouds, but when you're dealing with sun, to just get a bird that cooperates and goes into the right spot that gives the right light and angle. Because I mean, if we think about if he was standing in a spot and this bird came out, a bunch really far to the left, he could have had like this really strong side lighting that just could have been, again, it could have been cool, but it would have been an entirely different photo. Just
yeah.
completely change the look of it just based on a slight angle change with the sun like that you don't quite get as much of a dramatic difference when you're shooting in flat or overcast light.
Yeah. And also, I feel like with backlight, I mean, it could have definitely popped up in front of him, but I feel like a lot of times when we're setting up shots like this, you got to like run around and you have to
Yeah.
position yourself with the sun and everything. So, I mean, this definitely could have happened where it sort of was there and he was waiting for it because he knew, but it could have also been the thing where he saw it and then just like running around like crazy. Because
Yep.
I feel like that happens with me whenever there's good backlight. It's like waiting for the bird. And when it comes, yeah, just gotta like run
Always
around.
running to line things up. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, man. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And then people are
No,
looking like, what the heck is he doing?
exactly. I've been known to do that many times. Yes.
Oh,
Keeping
wow. That,
warblers.
yeah, more warblers. That's such a great shot. Um, I think it also gives a little perspective into how small warblers are. I
Yeah.
mean, it could have been a bigger leaf, but in general, like warblers are so small.
And blue
Um,
wings especially, they're super tiny.
yeah, yeah, and that plumage just stands out though amidst that green and that soft background, and then the cool leaves in the foreground. Um, yeah, and when I've gone, to do some photography with people or just like my dad, I've been like, oh my gosh, that's a different type of warbler. He'll be like, it kind of just looks like a little sparrow or something. Like you
Yeah.
don't initially, I mean, sometimes you do, but you don't always initially see that like this a blue wing, like the super yellow and
Yep.
the cool colors on the bird. Um, yeah, they just sort of sometimes look like, I don't know, little sparrows hopping on the ground. And
Yep.
people, I think a lot of times people overlook that, but um, yeah, I think this is done really well to show off like the little gem in the forest that are
Yeah.
there. And
Totally, man.
also, I think he mentions in the caption it's during a rainy day or something.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love shooting in the rain because you can see some of the water droplets on the
Yep.
vine. Yeah, right there. Um, yeah, because warblers sometimes I think are more active in the rain during in some parts if it's not too heavy.
Correct.
Or yeah. So I love the composition too, with the rain and everything, and then with the
Yeah.
dark shadows on the side. I think it really works as an awesome image.
Agree with everything you said there, man. Yeah, the rain elevates it, no doubt. And yeah, I definitely notice the same thing as far as activity, especially right after a rain. That's when they're
Yeah,
really out feeding heavily. And the composition on this is what really made it stand out. We were just talking about how, soft overcast light can be not quite as dramatic as the sunlight on the previous shot. And it's not, right? The lighting here is not as dramatic as the other shot. But what this shot has is amazing composition, and
yeah,
amazing framing with this giant leaf, almost dwarfing the tiny blue wing warbler. Great leading lines here. A couple of nice textures with you got the flat leaf and then you got the seeds or whatever kind of arching in right underneath. I mean, just all these elements are working so nicely in this composition.
yeah,
And that's what elevates this from just a flat light smooth background bird on a branch kind of thing to a scene of this warbler. That's what I see this as. It's an entire scene that's well thought out, well composed, and well captured.
yeah, yeah. Definitely, it's a
Yeah.
really awesome shot, and yeah, I keep going back to that leaf in front of it because it
Yeah.
really, I mean, it has some shadows on, it has tons of texture, and yet your eye is like still super drawn to the bird, almost not because of that, but it just sort of draws
Yep.
all your attention towards the bird.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you been able to capture blue wing warblers much?
No, I mean, I think I've seen maybe one, but no, I haven't really spent a lot of
Gotcha.
time with them. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they're so tiny. What strikes me about them? I find them to be they're like real slender compared to a lot of other warblers that are a little bit more round or plump. They're just like a
yeah,
real slender build, which makes sense because of how they feed. They're always hanging upside down and everything like that. So they're really fun. Yeah, fun song. And that yellow that you mentioned, like how it can kind of a lot of people overlook them and the differences between them. There's one place where I get to photograph prairie warbler and blue wing warbler in the same spot quite often. And prairie warbler is a very bright yellow bird, but when you see a blue wing flying next to it, or I've actually seen them in the same bush at the same time, you're like, wow, this blue wing actually makes the prairie look dull. Like that yellow is so insanely bright, especially like on the head and the breast there. It's just incredible how, to the average untrained eye, right? You show them both species, they'd be like, oh yeah, it's a little yellow bird, but there
yeah,
are really interesting differences there.
yeah, yeah,
Oh man, talking about a scene, it doesn't get much more of a gorgeous scene than that right there. Caleb killing it again with another wide angle shot of an owl. I had somebody picked one of his other owl, I think a barred owl images on one of the recent episodes. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's showing that this is a great example because it's another one of his images that this is that time in the field thing, man. It really shows that it's not just dumb luck that Caleb comes across an owl and is able to photograph it with a wide angle.
hmm
It doesn't
yeah,
happen that often. So it doesn't happen that often to any photographer, and he's got multiple different species and different locations with this same setup. So it really shows how he puts the work in and the time in.
yeah,
Compositionally, love it. Love that the bird is on the right third like that. Great, almost spotlight effect on it there, and then the forest. And I've talked to him about the look of these photos in the background, and to me, it's almost has like this kind of hazy, kind of painterly look to it back there.
yeah, yeah,
And he's pretty much told me, he's like, it's this super cheap lens that I use. That's probably not like the most sharp. In fact, I don't even know. He may have even said it's like partially broken. I don't remember if that was him or not, but
Okay.
in any case, it definitely gives a very interesting look to these photos because I remember messaging him about, one of these types of wide angles and just like, what did you do to edit this? Because it has like this almost dreamy feeling in the background,
Yeah.
because I was just curious. It just didn't look like a standard edit. And he's like, I didn't really do too much of the edit. I think it's just the junky lens that I'm using is kind of what he said, which I think is an awesome point, right? Like you don't need the most high end gear to get amazing photos. You know what I mean? If that was exactly the case on this, but it's a beautiful look. It's really cool that it's a rufous phase, because that helps make it stand out a little bit more. And it's got a very different color than the rest of the scene. Love all the vines and the line. I love how the trunks of these trees just give like interesting lines that are all kind of, I don't know, they're almost like tendrils, just all kind of coming in towards the main trunk. It looks like a palm tree that it's in there. So it's just a really cool shot, and it looks like a remote setup, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. When I first saw this image, I was like, oh my gosh, who gets a wide angle shot of a screech owl? Like that must have taken
Yeah.
forever, or like just such a knowledge about like that bird and stuff. So yeah, and I think what you were talking about with the wide angle, I've had some people just be like, oh, but photographers and stuff, don't they just use like giant lenses and that's how they get good photos? And I think the trend of like doing more wide angle and putting on the wide angle lenses is just sort of showing that it doesn't necessarily have to be about the gear. I mean, good gear
Yeah.
helps, but
Yep.
like
No doubt.
like wide angle, and especially in this, it gives so much more of like the environment and just where the bird is, sort of, not just like the close type portrait, which of course are nice too.
Yep.
But yeah, and yeah, that dreamy look, I was wondering the same thing actually, because it just has this like ethereal, like super
Yeah.
dreamy look to it. Yeah, and yeah, it's just a super cool image. And I think the flora at the bottom, like all the,
Yes.
or not flora, like the plants and stuff everywhere
Yep.
and the vines, um, yeah, sort of like gives this vibe of like this hidden space sort of that this owl lives in. Because I mean,
Totally.
finding like a screech owl isn't the easiest thing. You know what I mean? They're not in like these
I've
super.
never seen one. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen one either. So
Yeah.
um,
Definitely not easy.
yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, this it just gives this like this vibe of hiding there in this tree. And I also like how it seems as if that the tree it's actually roosting in is just sort of sticking out from everything else.
Yes.
It's like front and center. It has some cool shadows on it. And it's just leading your eye totally to the bird. Like
Yep.
there's not even any other branches that you
No.
can see on the trunk or on the tree. It's just totally about the bird being there amidst the environment.
Yeah, bonus for the palm trees, right? No branches until the top. That's the
Yeah.
nice thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point. One of the things that is really fun with wide angle bird photography or wide angle any photography, right, is you can do that. You get so much more depth to a photo, for lack of a better term, right? You get to kind of explore more layers because that's what telephoto lenses do, right? They compress everything. We're just seeing like this small tiny sliver of everything, and of course the super shallow depth of field just can easily isolate things. So that's the challenge of wide angle photography, is how do you isolate stuff when you have so much more that's in focus or visible, at least in a shot. And then you can really start to play with those layers like this, where you can see this tree is in front of all that stuff very clearly.
Yeah.
It's painfully obvious when you look at this scene, and that really helps make this thing just kind of jump out of the page at you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right, last image. Here we go.
Oh wow. That is such I think I remember seeing that image actually.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so like the mood and the feel of it is so, so interesting and awesome. So is that a black bellied or golden?
Golden. Yep.
Golden? Okay, so that's a golden plover.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean, initially your eye is just right on the bird because of the backlight of that. But also I think it's really cool how there's these really different hues and colors coming from the sun.
Yeah.
Um, Also in the top right of the frame, you can
Mm-hmm.
see maybe like mountains or clouds or
Yep.
something, giving it these different layers that all draw your attention to the bird, perched amidst like these awesome flowers and plants and stuff.
Yeah.
And that low perspective, I think, is super helpful here because it just draws your eye right to that bird as it looks out. Yeah, and the color palette here is so cool because
It
you got
is.
the mood. Yeah, you got the mood of the feathers of the bird itself, and then you have like the pink and the purple of the flowers, and then as you move up, you just get more blues and yellows and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like this again, like that hazy, dreamy look. Super super cool in this image, and yeah, like I love how maybe the trees or the bushes in the background sort of give this little opening to where the bird is looking.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's kind of cool how it does that. Um, yeah, it's a really great image.
Yeah, a couple of points you mentioned that really stand out to me: the color palette and the mood. Right, there's such a
Mm.
mood to this photo. These colors work so well together. They're not common colors that I feel like you see with shorebird photography.
Yeah,
So that just throws it all off to begin with, in a good way. It just makes it stand out from the rest of the crowd. So that I love to begin with, and that again you mentioned just like our previous photo, the dreamy look about it, and to me that comes from one of the things that I love that lens flare can do. Having a little bit
yeah,
of that sun, that lens flare in it, to me it makes me feel like as the viewer I'm laying there and almost have to, I almost like squint my eyes because I feel like there's the bright sun is just starting to creep into the lens there. It
yeah,
just makes you feel like you're really there. And that's something that I think that lens flare and the right amount of lens flare can do, because it's all too easy. Like, had this photographer included, you can see it looks like
yeah,
that's either the sun touching there, or at least the incredibly bright sky right around the sun is just coming into the frame
yeah,
there. Well, if he included a bunch more of that, now all of a sudden you have this big bright area at the top of the frame that's just really pulling, because this is a darker, a little bit more moody image. So
yeah,
I love that it's just that little sliver there and not like a big in your face bright spot of sun that would probably otherwise detract or distract from the photo, from the subject. So yeah, I think it's composed so well. It's done just right. Love all the layering you mentioned, and of course, I mean those flowers, and it, just a gorgeous bird.
yeah. And it also I mean, it's a gorgeous scene as it is, but
Yeah.
lens flare and backlight and stuff. I've been at like just random parking lots and fields and stuff. Um, and you get like that good light, and then it just totally transforms the scene. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And once you start playing around with lens flare, it like creates all these layers and stuff that are totally unexpected. Because like some of my favorite places to shoot are just really bland, like parks and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but they're just full of birds. And then once you get good light in there, it just sort of transforms the scene to be,
Yes, it
you
does.
can just make it sort of what you're like, this is more moody, and you
Yep.
can just sort of transform it. And it's super cool.
Yeah, very much. And the last thing I want to mention about it that you just touched on is that element of surprise that comes with lens flare. There's been a few
Yeah.
photos that we've talked about today that have these different elements of surprise in the photo for the photographer. I think
Yeah.
you can't fully control them, and I'm leaning more and more lately in my own photography path. I'm leaning more and more into that type of photography, almost a throwback to film days where you would shoot something you didn't know it was going to happen until later. We're so used to, at least for me, I'm so used to being able to take a shot, and I've been shooting long enough that generally I already know what it's going to look like. But if I'm unsure, I can just look at it right in the back of my camera. Or now with mirrorless, I can look at it as I'm still looking
Yeah.
through the viewfinder, right? So that immediate gratification and verification of, oh yeah, I thought the shot was going to look like this, and yes, it does. It is so there with digital photography that
Yeah.
I kind of love this concept of introducing different things, different styles of shooting, different locations of shooting, different ways of shooting that introduce an unknown element to the photo of, I don't know what's going to happen when I press the shutter, and it may be completely hard. It may look horrible, but it may be something pretty magical. And lens flare, shooting through foreground, shooting in those busy scenes, those uncontrolled songbirds that we mentioned, all those things are elements that I think add to that, almost a sense of what's this photo, this sense of mystery as I'm shooting, that I love. And when it works out, it's a pretty cool thing as the photographer to have experience.
Yeah. And what you mentioned about not knowing sort of what's going to happen as much with lens flare just remind me of, I was actually when I was in Cape May at the end of my trip, my camera broke, but I
Oh
could
no.
still take photos. Yeah, I could still take photos, but it was essentially frozen, and I couldn't actually review any of the photos on the screen or anything. So when I was like at the beach when it happened, so shooting
Yeah.
shorebirds. So I would take photos of these shorebirds and stuff, but then I didn't know what any of them looked like. I mean, but aside from that, so it was this weird experiment sort of forced on me of
Yeah.
like what's going to happen, and I didn't know until I uploaded onto my computer when I got home what they looked like, and it was really interesting to just play around with different stuff and see how it would come out.
Yeah.
Like you said, totally unexpected. So it was very interesting. I mean, of course, some of the shots were just like terrible, and if I had just moved a little, I would have known that it would have made it a lot better.
Sure.
But some of the shots did come out, and it was kind of cool to know that, like, it was just sort of messing around, seeing what would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting experience, no doubt.
Yeah.
So, did you get the camera fixed? Was it able to?
Yeah, I got it back yesterday. I sent it. It was basically like sand and stuff had gotten in, and then
I know.
messed with
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So
All right. So
yeah.
pro tip I'm going to give you right here, everybody listening. So, because I've helped a few people out with this, shooting on the beach, all of a sudden your controls stop working, basically, right? Like you can't hit certain buttons. Usually the culprit of that is wet sand. So dry sand usually doesn't have too much of an issue kind of getting into the buttons and freezing things up, but it's usually wet sand. So the first step is I usually keep my shooting hand, my right hand that's on the camera and controlling most of the buttons. I always try to keep that hand dry. So if I'm crawling around the wet sand, I always use just my left hand, and then that doesn't really touch the camera as much. So that's one thing to help prevent it from happening. But if it does happen and you get, the buttons are stuck and you can't operate the camera, if you can plan ahead and bring it with you, it's helpful. If not, when you get home, get a little tiny straight pin, just a little tiny pin or like a safety pin, and open it up and just outline every button. Just take that pin and go around the buttons. And usually you'll find one of those buttons that has the sand kind of ingrained in it, and the pin can kind of pop that sand out and free the button up, and you can kind of fix it on your own. If you don't have a pin with you and you're out in the field, what I'll usually do is I'll turn the camera off, and then I just start like mashing every button pretty hard. Like I'll take like the button, and I'm just like tapping on every button pretty hard like that, and just trying to free that sand up. And sometimes you can get it to be enough that you'll get the buttons free again, and the camera will start functioning and that sort of thing. Because what usually happens is it can be any one of the buttons that's stuck in the pressed position, and so the camera ignores every other button press because it thinks you're constantly pressing that button. So
yeah, also I've used the toothbrush too to like get in
there you go. Yep.
Yeah, toothbrush, and I mean the pin too, but
yeah.
So yeah, and a cover for the camera was probably the move, but mine was like open at the end, so it was just letting water like sit at the bottom when I was going the wave. So I was like, this is useless. I like to do it. But then I got another one to use. So
okay, that's good. That's good. Well, at least you're still able to shoot, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, dude, we did it. That was the show. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, Josh, it was great to have you on, man. Love seeing these photos. I'm looking forward to seeing. Oh, this is so good too, man. Well done. Common species photographed in a unique way, dude. Well done.
Yeah, that was the lens flare, because there was part of the reason it was framed like that is because there was a parking lot literally right above that.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't want the cars in it, so I was like, kind of.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done, man. Well done. So, excellent. All right. Well, thanks again, dude. I look forward to seeing what else you come up with, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. All right, man.
Yep. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I think we had some really great photos here. Stay tuned. Next Saturday, next episode will be coming out, and I'll see you then.